The drums were beating. The whole village had gathered at the square for the matchmaking festival. Young men and women stood in their finest clothes, smiling shyly at one another. Mothers whispered to their daughters. Fathers nodded proudly at their sons. But in the center of it all, one young man stood alone. His name was Chike. His face was hard, his arms were crossed, and his voice, when it came, cut through the laughter like a knife. "I will never marry," he shouted, "because women only love money. They do not love men. They love what men can give them." The drums stopped. The laughter died. Even the children went quiet. His mother covered her face in shame. His father, a humble man named Obi, stood at the edge of the crowd. His eyes were filled with sorrow. An elder leaned toward another and whispered, "Pride this loud always ends in sorrow." Chike looked around, daring anyone to challenge him. No one did, but his father's eyes never left him. Something had to change. Chike had not always been this way. Once he had been kind. Once he had loved a girl named Adana. She had bright eyes and a voice that made him smile. He would bring her flowers from the forest. She would laugh and thank him with soft words. He believed she loved him. He believed they would marry. But one day, a wealthy trader came to the village. He wore fine clothes and carried gold. Adana's father approved the match immediately. She did not fight it. She left with the trader without looking back. Chike waited for her to return. She never did. That betrayal planted a seed of bitterness in his heart. It grew and grew until it choked out every other feeling. What Chike did not know was that the trader later lost everything. His business collapsed, his gold disappeared. But Chike never heard this. He only remembered the pain. And now he wore that pain like armor. His father watched him become colder each year, and finally Obi made a decision. Something had to be done. That night, while the village slept, Obi walked alone to the sacred shrine at the edge of the forest. The path was dark. The air smelled of earth and old prayers. Candles flickered at the entrance. Inside, the carved face of the ancestors stared down at him. Obi knelt and bowed his head. "Great spirits," he whispered. "My son is drowning in bitterness. His heart has turned to stone. I fear he will live and die alone, angry at a world that never truly wronged him." He paused, his voice breaking. "Give me wisdom. Show me how to save him before it is too late." The shrine was silent, but then, slowly, the flame of the candle nearest him began to flicker. It leaned toward him as if listening. Obi felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not an answer in words, it was a feeling, a knowing. He stood slowly and whispered to himself, "Then I will show him the world he refuses to see." He left the shrine with a plan forming in his mind. A dangerous, risky, painful plan. When Chike woke the next morning, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. He called out, "Father?" No answer. He walked to his father's room. The mat was empty. The clay pot was still full of water. His father's sandals were gone. But his walking stick, the one he never left behind, leaned against the wall. Chike frowned. He stepped outside. The compound was empty. He asked a neighbor, "Have you seen my father?" The woman shook her head. "No, but I saw him before dawn walking toward the forest." Chike's chest tightened. His father never went to the forest alone. He was old. His legs were weak. Why would he go there? Chike muttered. The neighbor shrugged. Perhaps he needed to pray. Chike stood still, staring up the tree line in the distance. A strange fear crept into his heart. He tried to push it away, but it stayed. His father had never left without a word before. Never. By midday, Obi still had not returned, and by evening, the whole village knew. The wise elder was missing. By the third day, the village was buzzing with rumors. Some said Obi had been bewitched by an angry spirit. Others claimed he ran away because of the shame his son had brought upon the family. Women whispered at the well, "That boy's pride drove his father into hiding." Men argued at the market, "No, the old man went to seek help from the gods." Chike tried to ignore them, but everywhere he went, eyes followed him, judgmental, accusing. One evening, a messenger arrived at his door. It was a young girl, trembling slightly. "The seer has called for you," she said. Chike's stomach dropped. The seer was an old woman who lived near the shrine. People said she could see what others could not. "Why does she want me?" Chike asked. The girl shook her head. "She did not say, but she said you must come now." Chike hesitated. He did not believe in seers or spirits, but something in the girl's eyes made him afraid. Reluctantly, he followed her through the village toward the flickering light of the shrine. The seer sat cross-legged in front of the shrine, her eyes closed. Smoke rose from a burning bundle of herbs. The air smelled bitter and ancient. Chike stood at the entrance, unsure. "Come closer," the seer said, without opening her eyes. He stepped forward slowly. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were clouded but sharp. "Your father walks the path of the forgotten," she said. Chike frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means he has left the world you see and entered the world you refuse to see." "That makes no sense," Chike snapped. The seer smiled faintly. "Only humility can bring him back." Chike felt anger rise in his chest. "Humility? What does that have to do with anything?" The seer did not answer. She only stared at him. Chike clenched his fists. "You speak in riddles because you know nothing." He turned and stormed out of the shrine. His heart was pounding. As he stepped into the open air, someone bumped into him. It was a beggar, thin and ragged, his face hidden beneath a hood. "Watch where you're going," Chike shouted. The beggar said nothing, but his eyes, just for a moment, seemed strangely familiar. Chike shoved the beggar aside. "Move, you beggars are always in the way." The beggar stumbled, but did not fall. He looked up at Chike with calm, steady eyes. "Forgive me," he said softly. Chike sneered. "Forgive you? You probably earned your misery. People like you are lazy. That's why you beg." The beggar said nothing. He simply adjusted his torn cloth and stepped aside. Chike walked away, feeling a strange unease in his chest. He glanced back once. The beggar was still standing there, watching him. There was something about those eyes, something that made Chike feel seen in a way he did not like. He shook his head and kept walking. But as he turned the corner, he did not notice that the beggar had begun to follow him, quietly, from a distance, like a shadow that would not leave. The beggar's face, hidden beneath dirt and rags, showed no anger, only sadness, and something else, determination. Chike walked faster, feeling the weight of eyes on his back, but when he turned again, the beggar was gone. Or so he thought. The next morning, Chike went to the marketplace to buy yams. The air was filled with the sounds of haggling, laughter, and the smell of roasted corn. As he walked past the stalls, he saw the beggar again. The man sat near the palm oil cellar, his hand stretched out. "Please," the beggar said to a passing woman, "just a small piece of bread." The woman ignored him. Another person spat near his feet. Chike watched with disgust. Then a young woman approached. She was plain-looking, with kind eyes. Her clothes were old, but clean. She bent down and placed her only piece of food into the beggar's hands. "Eat," she said gently. "You need it more than I do." The beggar bowed his head. "May the spirits bless you, child." The young woman smiled and walked away. Chike rolled his eyes. Foolish girl, he muttered, wasting food on a lazy man. But something inside him stirred. Something uncomfortable. The beggar looked up and their eyes met again. This time the beggar did not look away. He stared at Chike as if reading his soul. Chike turned quickly and walked away. His heart was beating too fast. Over the next few days, strange rumors began to spread. Villagers whispered that the beggar seemed to know too much. He asked me about Obi's farm, one man said. How did he know Obi even how to farm? A woman added, he told me the name of Obi's late wife. No stranger should know that. Chike heard these rumors and felt a chill run down his spine. Who was this beggar, and why did he seem so interested in his family? One afternoon, Chike decided to go to his father's abandoned farmland. Maybe he would find a clue. Maybe his father had left something behind. The farm was overgrown with weeds. The small hut was empty. Chike walked around slowly, searching. Then he noticed something strange. Footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, not his usual sandals. He followed the prints. They led to the edge of the property and disappeared into the forest. He knelt down and brushed the dirt aside. Something glinted in the soil. He picked it up. His breath caught. It was his father's pendant. The one he never took off. Chike stood slowly, clutching the pendant. A voice spoke behind him. Looking for something? It was the beggar. Chike spun around. The beggar stood just a few feet away, watching him calmly. Why do you keep appearing everywhere I go? He demanded. The beggar tilted his head. Perhaps because you are looking for something you cannot see? Stop speaking in riddles, Chike shouted. Who are you? What do you want? The beggar stepped closer. His voice was soft but firm. Some truths must be seen, not told. Chike's hands trembled. How do you know about this pendant? How do you know my father? The beggar's eyes softened. I know many things, Chike. I know you are afraid. I know you are angry. And I know you are searching for someone you have already found. Chike's chest tightened. You're mad. The beggar reached out slowly and touched the pendant in Chike's hand. This belonged to a man who loved his son more than anything in the world, even when that son could not see it. Chike jerked his hand away. His breathing was fast. His mind was spinning. Stay away from me. He turned and ran. He did not stop until he reached the village. But even as he ran, he felt the beggar's eyes on him, watching, waiting, knowing. That night, Chike could not sleep. He lay on his mat, staring at the ceiling. The pendant was clutched tightly in his hand. His father's face kept appearing in his mind. Where was he? Why had he left? And why did that beggar know so much? Chike sat up and looked at the pendant. It was simple, just a carved piece of wood on a string. But his father had worn it every day since Chike was a child. He never explained why. He just said it was important. Chike closed his eyes and whispered, "Father, where are you?" There was no answer, only the sound of the wind outside. He lay back down and finally drifted into a restless sleep. But in the morning, when he opened his door, he froze. The beggar was sitting right outside. His back leaned against the wall, and in his hands he held another pendant, identical to the one Chike had found. Chike's heart stopped. How? The beggar looked up at him. His eyes were tired but kind. Because I know who your father was, and I know what he left behind. Chike could not speak. He could only stare. Later that day, Chike went to the river to clear his mind. He sat by the water, throwing stones and trying to make sense of everything. Footsteps approached. He turned and saw the kind young woman from the marketplace, the one who had given her food to the beggar. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Chike looked away. "I'm fine." She sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "You don't look fine." "Why do you care?" he snapped. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because I see someone in pain, and I know what that feels like." Chike let out a bitter laugh. "You think you understand me?" "No," she said, "but I understand what it's like to feel alone." Chike turned to her, his eyes hard. "You're only here because you think I have something to offer, just like everyone else." Her face fell. Tears filled her eyes. "That's not true." Chike stood up. "Leave me alone." She stood as well, wiping her eyes. "I only wanted to help." Without another word, she walked away. Chike watched her go, feeling a strange ache in his chest. From the trees nearby, the beggar watched silently. His expression was sad and knowing. That night, Chike had a dream. He was standing in the middle of the village square, but no one was there. The air was thick and silent. Then the seer appeared, walking toward him slowly. Her voice echoed in his ears. "Not all who reach out want your gold, Chike. Some only want to reach your heart." He tried to speak, but no words came. The seer pointed behind him. He turned and saw the kind young woman standing in the distance. She was holding out her hand, but he could not move. "Open your eyes," the seer said, "before it is too late." Chike woke up suddenly, gasping for air. His body was covered in sweat. He sat up and looked around his room. Everything was still. Then he heard something outside, a soft rustling sound. He stood and walked to the door. When he opened it, he froze. The beggar was there again. This time he was lying on the ground, asleep, and clutched in his hand was his father's pendant, the same one Chike had found. Chike's heart stopped. "How?" The beggar looked up at him. His eyes were tired but kind. "Because I know who your father was, and I know what he left behind." Chike could not speak. He could only stare. The next morning, the village gathered at the square. An emergency meeting had been called. The elders sat in a circle. The people stood around them, murmuring. Chike was brought to the center. "You have neglected your father," one elder said. "His disappearance because of the shame you brought." Another added, "Your cruelty has poisoned this village." Chike's jaw tightened. "I did not make him leave." "Then where is he?" a woman shouted. "Why hasn't he returned?" Chike had no answer. The crowd grew louder. Some pointed at him, some shook their heads in disgust. Then a voice cut through the noise. "Enough." Everyone turned. The beggar stepped forward. He looked at the elders and spoke clearly. "This young man has made mistakes, but he is not heartless. I have watched him, and I have seen his struggle." The crowd went silent. Chike stared at the beggar in shock. Why was he defending him? The beggar continued, "Do not judge him so harshly. The truth is more complicated than you know." An elder frowned. "And who are you to speak for him?" The beggar smiled faintly. "Someone who knows him better than you think." Chike's heart pounded. The beggar turned and walked away, leaving the crowd confused, and Chike more shaken than ever. Later that day, an old woman approached Chike. Her name was Mama Ngozi. She was respected in the village. "I must tell you something," she said. Chike looked at her warily. "What is it?" "That beggar," she said. "He saved my grandchild 3 days ago. The boy was drowning in the stream. The beggar jumped in and pulled him out." Chike blinked. "He did?" Mama Ngozi nodded. "Yes, he did. But when we tried to thank him, he refused. He said it was nothing." Another villager added, "I saw him give his only coin to a widow. He had nothing left, but he gave it anyway." Chike felt a strange tightness in his chest. Why would he do that? Mama Ngozi looked him in the eye, because that is who he is. A man who protects, a man who gives, a man who loves without condition. She paused. He said something strange, though. He said, "A father protects always." Chike's breath stopped. "What did you say?" Mama Ngozi repeated it slowly. "A father protects always." Chike's hands began to shake. His mind was spinning.
Why would a beggar say that? Why would he use those exact words? His father used to say that all the time. Chike staggered backward, his vision blurring.
That evening, Chaiki was summoned to the shrine again. The seer was waiting for him. This time, the fire in the shrine was burning high and bright. "Come," she said. Chaiki stepped inside slowly. The heat from the flames made him sweat. The seer looked at him with piercing eyes. "Your father walks among you, Chaiki, cloaked by your own blindness." Chaiki's voice shook. "What are you saying?" "You have seen him. You have spoken to him, but you refuse to believe." "That's impossible," Chaiki whispered. The seer leaned forward. "Is it, or are you simply too proud to see the truth?" Chaiki opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, the fire roared suddenly and then went out completely. The shrine was plunged into darkness. Chaiki stood frozen, his heart racing. The seer's voice came from the shadows. "Open your eyes, child, before it is too late." Chaiki stumbled out of the shrine, gasping for air. His mind was a storm of confusion and fear. He looked around wildly, and in the distance, he saw the beggar walking slowly toward the forest. Without thinking, Chaiki began to follow him. Chaiki kept his distance, moving quietly through the trees. The beggar walked with purpose, his steps steady despite his ragged appearance. Finally, the beggar stopped at a large tree. Chaiki recognized it immediately. It was his father's favorite tree, the place where he used to sit and think. The beggar knelt down slowly. He placed his hand on the bark and whispered, "Forgive me for doing this, but he must learn." Chaiki gasped. His heart pounded so hard he thought it would burst. The beggar's head snapped up. "Who's there?" Chaiki froze. The beggar stood and turned around, scanning the forest. For a moment, their eyes almost met. Then Chaiki ducked behind a thick bush, holding his breath. The beggar stared in his direction for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned and walked deeper into the forest. Chaiki stayed hidden, his hands trembling. His mind was racing. That voice, those words, the way he moved. It was all too familiar, but it couldn't be. It couldn't be, could it? When Chaiki finally stood, the beggar was gone, but in the dirt near the tree, Chaiki saw something. Fresh footprints, and beside them, a message scratched into the earth. "See with your heart." Chaiki ran after the beggar, crashing through the bushes. "Wait, stop," he shouted, but the beggar did not stop. He moved quickly, disappearing between the trees. Chaiki pushed forward, his breath heavy, his legs burned, but he could not let him go, not now, not when he was so close to the truth. The beggar moved with surprising speed for an old man. He leapt over roots and ducked under branches, as if he knew the forest by heart. Chaiki struggled to keep up. "Please," Chaiki shouted, "just tell me the truth." But the beggar did not answer. He only moved faster. Finally, Chaiki lost sight of him. He stopped, panting, his hands on his knees. The forest was silent. Too silent. Then, from somewhere nearby, he heard a sound. Soft. Broken. It was weeping. Chaiki straightened and followed the sound. It led him to a small stream, and there, sitting by the water, was a woman. Her clothes were tattered, her hair flowed like mist. She looked like she was made of moonlight. "Who are you?" Chaiki whispered. The woman looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. "I am the voice of fathers who sacrifice in silence." Chaiki stepped closer, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The woman stood slowly, her form shimmering in the fading light. "Look at what you refuse to see, Chaiki. Look with your heart, not your eyes." Chaiki gasped, his vision blurred. Images flashed through his mind. The beggar's eyes, his father's voice, the pendant, the words, the kindness, the patience, the sorrow. "No," Chaiki whispered, "it can't be." The woman smiled sadly. "The truth has been with you all along." Then, like smoke, she vanished. Chaiki stood alone by the stream, trembling. In his hand, the pendant began to glow faintly. He looked down at it, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time, he whispered the words he had been too afraid to say. "Father." Chaiki collapsed at the base of his father's favorite tree. His body shook with sobs.
All the anger, all the pride, all the bitterness he had carried for years came pouring out. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He buried his face in his hands. "I pushed everyone away. I hurt people who only wanted to help me. I was so afraid of being hurt again that I became the one who hurt others." His voice cracked. "I was wrong about everything." He stayed there for a long time, weeping like a child. The forest was silent around him. The wind whispered through the leaves. Then, from somewhere nearby, a figure stepped forward. It was the beggar. He stood a few feet away, watching Chaiki with quiet, sorrowful eyes. Chaiki did not see him. He was too lost in his grief. The beggar's lips trembled. He took a step closer, then stopped. His heart ached as he listened to his son's broken confession. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to hold him, but not yet, not until the lesson was complete. Silently, the beggar stepped back into the shadows, leaving Chaiki alone with his tears and his truth. The next day, word spread through the village. The beggar had agreed to speak publicly. He claimed to know the truth about Obi's disappearance. The entire village gathered at the square. Elders sat in their usual places. Women stood with their children. Men crossed their arms and waited. Chike was escorted to the center by two villagers. His face was pale. His eyes were red. The crowd murmured as he took his place. Then the beggar appeared. He walked slowly through the crowd, his head bowed. The villagers parted to let him pass. When he reached the center, he stood across from Chike. Their eyes met. Chike's breath caught. The beggar's gaze was steady, knowing, full of something Chike could not name. An elder spoke. "You say you know what happened to Obi. Speak then. Tell us the truth." The beggar nodded slowly. "I will. But first I must say this." He turned to the crowd. "Do not be quick to judge those who seem lost. Sometimes the ones who are hardest to love are the ones who need it most." The crowd was silent. The beggar looked back at Chike. "Are you ready to hear the truth?" Chike nodded, tears already forming. One villager stood up, anger in his voice. "This boy caused his father's disappearance. His pride and cruelty drove the old man away." Others nodded and shouted in agreement. "He shamed his family. He mocked the women of this village. He has no respect." Chike stood still, his head bowed. He did not defend himself. The accusations rained down on him like stones. Then the beggar raised his hand. "Enough." The crowd quieted. The beggar's voice was calm but firm. "You speak of his faults as if you have none. You judge him as if your own hearts are pure." He looked around at the faces. "How many of you have turned away a beggar? How many of you have refused to help someone in need? How many of you have let pride rule your hearts?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The beggar continued. "Before you condemn this young man, ask yourselves if you would pass your own test." He paused. "Now, let the truth be shown." Slowly, he reached for the hood of his ragged cloak. The crowd leaned forward. Chike's heart pounded. The beggar's fingers gripped the edge of the fabric, and then he pulled it back. Gasps rippled through the marketplace. Women covered their mouths. Men stepped back in shock. The face beneath the hood was old, weathered, covered in dirt and weariness, but it was unmistakable. It was Obi, Chike's father. Chike stumbled backward, his legs weak. "No, this cannot be real." Obi stood silently, letting the truth sink in. The crowd erupted in whispers. "It's him! Obi is alive! He was here all along!" Chike shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Father, you were—" Obi looked at his son with tired, sorrowful eyes. "Yes, my son, I was the beggar you insulted, The beggar you shoved, the beggar you said deserved his misery. Chike's knees buckled. He fell to the ground, sobbing. No, no, no! Obi took a step forward. I became what you despised, so you would learn what you refused to see. Chike looked up at him, his face twisted in agony. Why? Why would you do this? Obi's voice was gentle but firm. Because you were drowning, Chike, and I had to save you. Obi walked slowly toward his son. The crowd watched in silence. I watched you grow bitter, Obi said. I watched you push away every kind word, every helping hand. I watched you build walls so high that no one could reach you. He knelt down in front of Chike. And I knew that no amount of talking would change your heart. You had to see for yourself. Chike sobbed. I insulted you. I pushed you. I said terrible things. Obi nodded. Yes, you did. And you still... Chike could not finish. Obi placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I was never testing the villagers, Chike. I was testing you. Chike looked up, his eyes red and swollen. And I failed. Obi shook his head. No, you learned, and that is what matters. He lifted Chike's chin gently. A heart afraid of love becomes its own prison, but a heart willing to change can be free. Chike broke down completely, collapsing into his father's arms. Obi held him tightly, tears running down his own face. The village watched in silence as father and son wept together. It was a moment of healing, of truth, of love that had never left. After a long while, Obi helped Chike to his feet. The crowd was still silent, watching. Chike turned to face them, his voice shaking. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was blinded by my own pain, and I hurt people who only wanted to help me. He looked around at the faces. I am sorry. The crowd remained quiet. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to nod. Obi spoke. This is not just a lesson for my son. It is a lesson for all of us. When mistrust builds walls, love walks disguised, waiting for the heart to open its eyes. The elders nodded in agreement. Chike turned and saw the kind young woman standing at the edge of the crowd, the one who had given her food to the beggar, the one he had pushed away. Their eyes met. Slowly, she stepped forward. She did not speak. She simply held out her hand. Chike hesitated. Then, with tears still on his face, he reached out and took it. The crowd erupted in cheers. Obi smiled, his heart full. And as the sun set over the village, Chike learned the most important lesson of all. Love is not found in gold. It is found in the hearts of those willing to see it.